Today I'm going to show you how to create one of these monogram designs like this with the double rings and the font inside the rings, and then your whatever design it is you're using on the inside of it. So the first thing I'm going to do is I will select this, and we're going to delete it by hitting backspace on the keyboard, because we're going to draw one from scratch and show you how to do it. First thing I'll do is come over and select my circle tool. I'm going to hold Control on my keyboard, click somewhere on the screen, and drag down and to the right, or you could drag down and to the left. That will create a symmetrical circle because I'm holding the Control key. Then I'll come here to my selection tool. Now I'm going to want to turn the fill color off and my stroke color on to create these rings. So I'm going to come down here and click this X in the bottom left corner. That will turn my fill color off. Now if I hold the Shift key on my keyboard and select black, that will turn my stroke color on. Now I'm going to want these rings to be thicker. This is the Inkscape default, which is normally 10 thousandths on the stroke. So I'm going to set that to 300 thousandths. And that will be a decent thickness ring for a 15-inch monogram. Now, if your fill and stroke menu is not open, you'll find that under Object, Fill and Stroke, and that will bring you to this menu here where you can set your stroke style. You can also turn your fill color on and off here by selecting this. That would turn the fill on. You can hit the X, turn the fill off, and stroke is similar. You can turn the stroke on or turn the stroke off here. I prefer to do it down here, but there's two ways of doing that. So anyway, now I've got my stroke and I've set it to 300 thousandths, which would be a little over 1/4 of an inch, as you can see here. Now I'm going to size this ring to 15 inches, and my ratio is locked here. You can lock or unlock your ratio to keep this symmetrical. Now I'm going to create another ring to put inside this ring. I could draw a new circle, but I'll just click this, and I'm going to right click and hit duplicate here, or you could hit Control D on your keyboard, or you could go up here to edit and select duplicate here. Any of those three methods will duplicate your circle. So now that I've duplicated that, I'm going to hold Control and grab one of these corner arrows and pull that in, and that will keep symmetrical and size that down. Now I'm going to hold Shift with this small one selected, and I'm going to select the large ring because I want to center those up. So then I will go to my Align and Distribute menu. If yours isn't open, you can find it under Object, I believe. Align and Distribute down at the bottom. Mine's normally always open over here. Then the first thing, Inkscape usually wants to default to centering on the page or relative to the page. I like to select the last selected. So I selected the inner ring first and the outer ring last, so it will center this ring to this ring. So now I'm going to use this and center on the vertical axis, and then I'll select this and center on the horizontal axis. So now my ring's centered up in there. Now that, I might want to make it a little smaller. That's going to be pretty narrow font, so I'll go ahead and size it down. I'll maybe say 11.5. And then once again, I'll hold Shift, select this ring, and then I'll center that back up to where that ring is centered inside this ring. Now right now, even though these look like they're 300 thousandths thick, these are just single line strokes. These are not a path with an outer and an inner contour. Now to make this a monogram, to cut the way we want, we're going to need those to be a closed path with inner and outer contours. So if you select these and go to Path, Stroke to Path, now I'm going to put this view in outline mode. As you can see, the outer ring I converted stroke to path. That's now has two rings with an inner contour and an outer contour. That's what we want. This inner ring I haven't converted, and that's just a single line. That's not going to work for this. So I'm going to go back to View, Display mode, put it back in normal. Now I'll select the inner ring, and I'm going to go Path, Stroke to Path again. So now if I go back to view, display mode, outline, as you can see, now I have inner and outer contours on both rings. So now I'll set my view back to normal. Now to add font around these rings here. So the way I do it is I will select my ellipse tool again. I'll hold Control, drag down, create a symmetrical circle. Now I don't want this circle to be this thick just for the purpose of viewing it. So I'm going to go ahead and set that back to the Inkscape default of 0.01, 10 thousandths. And now as you can see, that's a thin circle. Now I'm going to change the color of that by holding Shift and selecting red, because I want that to contrast a little where I can see it. And then this ring I made 11.5 inches, so I'm going to make this circle just slightly under that. So I'm going to go 11.49, say. And because my ratio is locked, that size, the width and the height the same. Now I'm going to hold Shift with this one selected, and then I'm going to select this inner circle, and I'm going to go back to my Align and Distribute menu, and I'm going to center that circle vertically and horizontally so that it's hard to see here, but if I zoom in, you can see that that new circle is right on the edge of this. And I'm going to use this circle, this new circle I've drawn, to put my text on and curve it around that path. So now what I'll do is type out my font. So I'll say welcome. Now this is typing out in stroke because that was the last thing I did. So I'm going to want to put this to a fill. So I'll come down here and select black, and then I don't want that stroke on, so I'll hold Shift and hit this X here to turn that stroke off. So now here's my font. Now that's the font I'm going to follow this path and curve around this circle. I'm going to want it to touch top and bottom. So just to get it close, to make sure that it's going to touch top and bottom when I put that in there, I'm going to center it up there, and I'm going to pull this font up holding Control till it touches top and bottom. That looks pretty good there. So now when I put this text on this circle, it should touch the inner and outer circle. You might have to tweak on it a little afterwards, but it should be pretty close. So now I have this font, I select it, it's still text, I haven't converted it to a path. I'll hold Shift, select that red circle. Now I'm going to come up here to the text menu and select Put on Path. Now you can see what that did was now that put that welcome text on that path following that curve around. So now I'm going to select my circle, not the text. To manipulate the position of this font on this circle, you just select the circle, not the font. If you select the font and try to move it, it will, not work. So what I'm going to do is select this circle, click it again to where I have my arrows like this in the corner, and then now I can rotate that font around where I want it. Okay, that's pretty close. Now when I look at this font, as you can see, I'm touching, it appears on the top all the way around, but I'm not touching on the inside. That's going to be a problem. It's going to be a little bit of fixing I'm going to have to do. But what I can do here is I'll select my circle again, and I'm going to just bump that down a hair on the size. So I'll go 4.7 or 11.47. We'll see what that gets us. Now when I resize that circle, it's not going to be centered again. So I'm going to select that, select this inner circle, and then I'll center it on the vertical axis and the horizontal axis again. See where that's at? I've still got issues on that M and that W where they're not going to touch. So I'm going to select this circle again, and I'll make it slightly smaller. We'll try 0.42. That'll be a little more drastic on the adjustment there. So now the circle's still selected. Once again, I'll select this other circle, center it vertically, center it horizontally. Now you can see that brought us down a little closer where we're touching pretty much all the way around. Now we've got a little bit of an issue on this W. So maybe, and it looks like our C and 0, our O, E, it looks like our tops are not touching now, but what we can do there to fix that is we can come up here, we go to our font, and you can come up here to the size, and we'll just bump that up a little bit. So we'll say 2.1, see what that does. That's got it back pretty close. Still see a little hint of white here. So we'll just go here and say 2.15. That looks pretty good. Looks like everything's touching. Now this is pretty good. You could keep messing with it to get everything solid. Here I can see I got a little bit of a gap on this M, but I don't really want to just keep jacking with it. I can fix that after the fact, and that's not a bad issue to fix there. So overall, that's touching pretty good. I like the size of it. Everything's going to touch. It's going to work. Now what I want to do is I want to make sure this is, you know, pretty even side to side and centered up. If you come up here in your bar right here on your measurements, left click and drag down, this will pull an alignment guide down for you. So I'll pull that alignment guide down here, and as you can see, my W is down a little farther on the left than my E is on the right. So I'll click my circle again, click it again where I've got these rotation arrows, and then now I can tweak that a little bit. That looks a little more centered. Once you hover over this line, you can move it again, and that looks pretty even. So now when I'm done with that line, I can just come right back up here and it's gone. So my welcome's on there. That looks good. I'll keep that. So now when I'm done manipulating this, I'm going to select the text and I'm going to go path, object to path. Now that's converted to a path. I'm done with that welcome font for the moment. Now I'm going to type out a new font. I'm going to say to our home. And we'll put this on the bottom here. And that should be, let's see, did it keep, yep, it kept my size from the last size I used, so that should be the same size as that welcome font. So now what I'm going to do is the same thing. I'm going to select my font, hold shift, select that red circle, and then once again I'm going to go text, put on path. Now I'm going to change the color of the font so you can see what's going on here. As you can see, that put my To Our Home font on top, and it's oriented for the top, but I want this to go on bottom and I want it to flip. So what you'll do is unselect, select your red circle again, and then come up here, object flip vertical, click that, and as you can see, that will throw my font down on the bottom. But now the font is on the inside of that ring. We need it out here on the outside. This easy fix. There's two ways you could do this. You could, if you wanted, resize your red circle to where it's just slightly bigger than this inner portion of this ring here. The way I prefer to do it is I'll come here to my font text tool, and then if I hover over here, you see I've got that little cursor guide there. If I hover over here on the right, left click and drag around this curve, it will select my text. Now once it's all selected, if you hold the Alt key on your keyboard and then use the arrow down key, that will adjust your font out to wherever you want it. So I'll just keep clicking that arrow down until I get that font positioned where I want it. Now I can click my selection tool here, and then I'll zoom in a little and once again look and see if I have any issues, you know, where anything needs adjusted to overhang. That actually looks pretty good right there. So Now what I'm going to do is, once again, I'll come up here and left click and pull down my alignment guide, and as you can see, my T is a little higher than my E there, so I'll put that somewhere in between. Then I'll click my circle, click it again, get my rotation arrows, and then I'll just adjust that where they're evened up there. Once I'm done, as I said, hover over that until you see your hand icon there, and then you can drag that guide back up here and it'll go away. So now I've got that font positioned where I want it, its size positioned where I wanted. So now the last thing to do is just select the font, path, object to path, and now I can change that color to black to match everything else. And now at this point I'm done with that red circle I made. You're not going to want to forget and leave that. I'm done with that. I don't need it anymore, so I'll click on that and backspace on the keyboard and just delete it. Okay, so now we've created our two rings. We've put font on those two rings. Now the last thing to do would be to put this in here where you want it. So I would I've got that in there. I'm going to hold shift, select this ring, and I will use the center on vertical axis to get it in there. Now this, I made my rings a little different size than my last one, so I'm going to need to resize this. I changed the color of it so that I can see what I'm doing, because I don't want that to overlap past this ring here. Now I'm going to hold shift and select this ring again, and I'll center that again. And now I'm going to page this up. If I select this and come up here, this will page it all the way to the top. And doing that, now I can see if I'm overhanging too far anywhere. It doesn't look like I am. You know, if I zoom in here, it looks like I'm inside that ring, so that won't interfere and cut into the outside. So now I've got everything where I want it. My two rings are paths. My font is all converted to path. Now I will take my selection tool, left click, drag a box around all of it to select everything. And now I can go path union. Now this, if I come up here to view, display mode, outline, as you can see, that is now all one path. Short of needing a little bit of cleanup, this is ready to send to your CNC cutter and cut out. So now I'm going to go view, display mode, back to normal. The only thing left to do here would be a little bit of cleanup. So what I would do is come here to my node selection tool, and you remember that M, I said there were slight little issues there. Now this, it may or may not cause problems on your machine. Like on my machine, this is going to be too small to cut, so it would pretty much just ignore this, but I would still want to fix it. So if I come to my node tool, I come in here, what I would do, the easiest way for me, is I just come right here to this line, about where that line would intersect it if it connected, and double click. That will add a node. And then take your node selection tool, left click, highlight all three of those, hover your cursor over the new node we just added, and hit Shift J, and that will delete those other two nodes and join everything to that one spot that we just created. So now that little problem area is gone. And then of course on the other side of the M we had a similar spot. So same deal, I come here, double click, add a node there, drag a box, select all three, hover over that one, Shift J, and that connected those. Now you see what that did too, that also it screwed up the curve there. Instead of going out like this, it kind of flipped it straight. It's not a big deal. You could either grab this handle and pull this back straight where you want it, or alternatively, if you click between two nodes on a path, you see that lights both nodes up blue. Then you can come up here and hit straighten lines, and that will snap those two perfectly straight like they should have been. So you're going to want to, after you create your monogram, go around and look for any little spots like that. I think those were the only spots I had on this that I saw ahead of time. I don't see any other problem areas. If you do a good job overlapping your font, you won't have areas like that, or very minimal. So the last thing to do would just be going around and cleaning up nodes like this. I would select those 3, hit backspace. I would select these 3, hit backspace. Select those 4, hit backspace. Select those 3, hit backspace. So as you can see, go around and clean up those nodes like that. Like these would be unnecessary. Delete them. Delete them. And I would go around and clean up. On this contour, you can see that's not perfectly straight. So once again, you can use this straighten lines and work your way around this design. Clean up and reduce any excess nodes you see. You know, you don't have to get crazy, but you don't want a bunch of excess nodes. Like these, I would delete these. I would delete those. Delete that. I would get rid of this node. On these U's like this, I'll generally delete like all of those. I'll delete those. And as you can see, you work around and delete all these excess nodes, and you'll have a nice clean file when you're done that'll cut smooth, not give you any issues. So I'll go ahead and work my way around and just show you how I would clean it. Selected one extra there, so I'll deselect that. If you select one you don't want, you could just drag a new box and select the proper ones. But if you select an extra node like this, if I hold shift and click that node, it'll deselect it. So just work your way around, delete these excess nodes. Oh, there's a couple there I missed. This W's quite a mess. Don't need any of these excess nodes. And on these, like I did on that other, I would select these, straighten. Like I say, you can pull the handle straight, but it's a lot easier just to hit this straighten function up in your toolbar, and that will snap them perfectly straight instead of guessing. So I'll straighten all those out. And the C's a mess, so we'll get rid of these. And work over here. This O is a little too notey. Okay, and let's see. Oh, this M here has excess nodes. Worth noting too, this is preference, but this, take this M for example. This font here, when it comes up here, you've got actually a little flat spot right here, so you see 2 nodes. It almost looks like it's, you know, needs a little extra cleanup there. I'd probably just leave them. If you wanted, you could do like this and select them both, hover your cursor over one of them, hit Shift J and eliminate one of the 2 nodes so it just comes up to a point. For me, that wouldn't really be a problem. I would just leave them. So you work your way around, clean up any excess nodes that you don't need, and this really looks pretty good at this point. It's not bad. Once you're totally done, I did see a double node there. No, this is just an example, but you see how that node looks different than the other ones? If I highlight that, look down here, it'll tell you how many nodes you have selected. That has 2 of 60. That should just be 1 node there. So I'll hold shift with my cursor hovered over that, hit J, and then now when I select that, you see that's just 1 of 259 nodes. So I go around and reduce nodes. It's usually a good idea too to select nodes and use your smoothing, which is make selected nodes smooth here, and that will smooth those out to make sure they're nice and smooth. Once again, I also see a double node there. That might have actually been a little tiny little problem area. Yeah, I actually didn't see that. Probably need to zoom in closer to that spot. That's why it's good to look over and double check. Like say, this wouldn't cut on the cutter because that spot is too small, but you know, it's best to reduce nodes and get rid of spots like this. Just depending on your machine, they may or may not cause problems. So I'll select all three of those, Shift J, get rid of those, select, well, it's hard to see what I did there. I click between the two to highlight those two end nodes and snap those straight. Now you see what happened there. That's actually a good example. I'm going to hit Control Z. When I snap those two nodes, it doesn't happen often, but sometimes that will happen. This node appears to be a corner node. But what's happening here is this node's actually a smooth node. I don't know why Inkscape does this, but it will happen. And when I select those two and tell it to straighten the lines, you see what that did? That ruined my contour there. So I'll hit Control Z to go back. It's not a big deal when that happens. I'll select just that node and come up here and hit this Make Selected Nodes corner. You see it changed. If you watch closely there, you can see that that node changed a little. Now when I select those two and hit straighten, it snaps straight and that doesn't skew. I don't know why that happens. Can't explain that, but it does happen. Oh, and actually, I did not notice. Let me hit Control Z again. Huh. Yeah, I did not notice. If you seen that 0 right there, or that O, when I added a node here, that actually skewed that. I'll hit Shift Control Z and you can see what I'm talking about there. That O got skewed. So now I hit Control Z and go back, and that's the same story. That node is actually a smooth node. So I'll hit this, make it a corner node, and I'm going to go ahead and do that one too, since we already know that one is a smooth node. And now I could come back in here, zoom way in, add my additional node, highlight the 3, hover over that one, Shift J, then I can click this path, straighten, and snap that straight. Now all my contours are good. Nothing went haywire there. That was actually an unexpected error, but it's good that it happened, because those types of things happen, so it's good to see it and explain how to fix it. But anyway, so you work your way around this design, check for any little problem spots, reduce your nodes, come through, smooth your nodes, and when you're totally done, then the only thing left to do will be save your file. I'm not going to finish smoothing them, but you get the point there. So now the last thing I do, that's just my OCD. I mean, this is pretty squared up in the document. I like to make sure it's completely squared up. So I would come to File, Document Properties, or you can hit Shift Control D on your keyboard. Now that my document properties are opened up, I will come over here with my design selected, which it is, and use this resize to content. And if you watch the page, it just slightly adjusted, but now my design is zeroed on the X, zeroed on the Y axis. It's just the way I prefer to do it. You know, you don't have to. It's not going to hurt the DXF when you save it, but I prefer to have them centered up. And one nice thing too, if you're using like Windows Power Tools so that you have thumbnail views of your SVGs, when you center them up in the document, they just look better that way. It's easier to see your files when you're browsing through your folders. So I am done with this design. Now what I will do is just File, and I would save as. I would save it as a DXF for cutting if you want, and then save it as a SVG for future editing. That's what I was wanting to get at there. That's how you create one of these. They're very easy. And like I say, when I show you how to do something, it's not the only way. Like, for instance, when I put the font on the bottom here, I had the font in here because I left my circle the same size. If you're not comfortable with, you know, using your text selection and highlighting it and then Alt arrow keying down, you can just resize this circle to just slightly bigger than this inner contour here, and adjust your font that way. The only difference will be your spacing will be a little tighter if you do that, but you can adjust your spacing too. I mean, it's just personal preference. So this is how I would create this design, but that's not to say it's the only way, you know. Just like when I make the circles, I use the stroke, convert the stroke to path. You could also create a circle by drawing a solid object, duplicate it, make a slightly smaller object. Oh, I accidentally turned the stroke on there. Turn that off. You know, line and distribute, center that up, and then path, difference, and now I've essentially created the same type of ring. So when I tell you this is how I do it, that's not to say it's the only way of accomplishing it. I find this to be the easiest way, and hopefully it is for you too, but it's not the end all be all. There's always more than one way to skin a cat. Anyway, I hope this helps some people out. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe.